New Aphotic Realm announcement. Submission windows for upcoming issues. Issue 10, the theme is justice. That's hard-boiled fiction with a supernatural twist. The deadline for that will be April 1st, 2020. Issue 11, the theme is kaiju, giant monsters terrorizing civilization. Deadline will be October 1st, 2020 for those stories. Issue 12, the theme is lycanthropy, which is, of course, self-explanatory. It can be any type of animorph with a bloody twist. So I guess that's werewolves and giant, I don't know. What do people turn into? Seals? I've just got a little seal on my desk, so I thought of that. I don't know. You'll have to be more imaginative than I just was. But the deadline for lycanthropy, January 1st, 2021. Good luck to everyone submitting.
I wrote this thing. I hope you like it. Let's talk about it, yeah. Let's lose track. Losing the Plot Podcast. Losing the Plot Podcast. Losing the Plot Podcast. Talking to Leo and
My guest this episode is Jonathan Cosgrove. He has a story in Crystal Lake Publishing's latest anthology, Arterial Bloom. We had a great chat, and I hope you enjoy it. As always, if you would like to be on the show, or if you want to tell me anything about it, you can always get in touch with me using losingtheplotpodcast-at-gmail-dot-com, and I look forward to hearing from you. But that's enough intro chat from me, so here is my chat with writer Jonathan Cosgrove. What have you been up to? Staying home for 3 weeks or so?
3 weeks I've been home now, yeah. It's kind of getting a bit crazy at this point, because I think in Ireland it's been extended till May 5th, I want to say, or May 5th. It was the start of May. It was meant to be like the ending next week or whatever, but now it's pushed back further, which I guess everyone knew, but then it's kind of like, you kind of hope you'd be able to leave your house, or like within 2 kilometers we have at the moment. So
yeah.
What about yourself? What's going on there?
So I'm in Stavanger in Norway.
Right.
I haven't checked, but I assume it's the same. But I'm working from home, and I don't really notice. I think this is working out great for me.
Right. Yeah, I have noticed that like a lot of my hobbies seem to line up with the fact that I don't mind being at home a lot, but then occasionally it's like, I wouldn't mind going to the pub. Like, that would be nice, just once in a while.
That's true. You want the option at least.
Yeah, just so I can turn down invitations, to be like, as long as I know it's there.
It's funny. It just feels like everything is inverted. Like, for so long they've been told, like, if you want to succeed in business or life, you've got to be an extrovert. You've got to go out there, sell yourself, talk to people. And now it's like the opposite. Everyone's clamoring to talk to me, and I'm like, I can't be bothered, man.
Absolutely. To my life whatsoever. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I've noticed, like, even in like the work chats, like there'll just be like comments coming in, and I'm like, I don't actually need a lot of the correspondence I have with most of the people I work with at my job on a day-to-day basis to really get my job done. So I don't know if that's good or bad, or maybe just makes me sound like a misanthrope, but it's definitely jarring to see what the real reality is now.
Yeah. What is your day job?
I work as a copywriter for a marketing company.
Oh, okay, cool. So just lots of writing every day?
Lots of writing, yeah. It is, like, because like some of it like is like blog writing and very kind of like tedious, kind of talk about things I don't really care about. But like I kind of enjoy like the advertisement kind of stuff, the shorter, kind of snappier stuff. It would probably, if I started to explain it probably sounds really tedious and lame, but like it's just like the way you can structure sentences and stuff like that to kind of be more compelling, I think is a fun thing that I enjoy about my job. So yeah, no, it's a lot of writing every day, and the whole working from home thing suits me perfectly because I spend most of my time just with my headphones in trying to figure out how best to market the product anyway. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but It's decent. I've been doing that for about 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years. Yeah.
2 years, 2.5. Is this something that you trained for before you got the job, or?
No, not at all. Before I did this, I was living in Japan for about 4 years. I was teaching English over there.
Oh,
So I was complete. I moved back home. Like I lived in Dundalk in Ireland, and I moved back home. I was just like looking around for jobs, and this just kind of came up, and then I applied, got it, and still doing it. And then it's kind of one of those things where like I feel really lucky to be like writing every day as like my actual job. Um, but yeah, it's just something I just kind of fell into and I really enjoy doing, I guess.
interesting that you enjoy getting to write every day, because like I've talked to some creative writing teachers, and they're like, by the end of the day, they're looking at their own material, writing their own stuff, and they're like, my God, I've read so many short stories today. I can't be like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely does get like that for sure. Like I definitely find myself kind of sick of screens. Like I definitely would have a bit of headache towards the end of the day. Um, but it's an entirely different thing. Like, for me, like I wouldn't be looking at stories every day. I'm looking at marketing material, so it's very kind of, you're using a different part of your brain presumably to like look very mundane stuff, and then like when you get to kind of write some fiction or whatever. And I have tried to get up earlier, but lately, last while, it's not really working for me to get up before work and do my writing. But now it's more of an evening thing. But it's definitely kind of it engages me in a different way, I think, than just generally writing my day job is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It does sound like a very different type of writing. And I want to know if there are crossovers and stuff. But this thing about waking up early to write, I mean, lots of people do it, but there's absolutely no difference between writing for an hour in the evening and in the morning. It's just that the morning is tougher to do, I think, for most people. So they feel like they're a real writer. Oh, I woke up at 5. I'm realer than you.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, it's definitely like there's definitely like a whole kind of like a mythos about the waking up early and getting in your hours, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Like there isn't any difference in the writing per se, but just like I think there's a mental attitude that comes with it. I think in the morning I do feel a bit fresher to kind of make up, and like as I said, but like I'm looking at a screen all day. By the end of the day, I'm not particularly keen on looking at screens. I do it anyway, but I'm not too amped about it. So yeah, I don't think the writing itself really changes, but like the mental attitude that goes into it is a bit different. So I feel like maybe for me, I know it can be it feels a bit like a millstone sometimes, where I'm like, do I have to actually go write more stuff now because I've got a splitting headache? I'm not sure if I can really look at the screen. So I do something that's like not that. So that's definitely where it can come in for me, for being a bit more like maybe morning time would be better. But yeah, I totally agree that like the whole morning thing being the thing to make you a real writer is a bit of a con in some ways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with you, actually. Now that you make the point that you're fresher in the morning, and also like, there's something about just having woken up, you're kind of a bit more imaginative or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like there's just a whole kind of like you've less of that kind of internal monologue of this is terrible, because you spent all your day like looking at stuff that's relatively decent, or you've read stories, you've read newspapers or whatever, and then you're kind of coming back to your own work being like, why is everything I write garbage? So whereas in the morning, like you can kind of push that away for a bit, like just a little bit longer, where you can kind of live in your own bubble of your own head. Yeah, so I definitely I've found in the past. Again, I'm really not like a morning writer anymore. But when I started writing, I was very kind of like into the whole getting up early and getting a couple of hours of writing. And it definitely was helpful for me for the first while, but just you kind of have to adapt, I think, as you go along, and kind of be aware of where you're feeling stronger. And if I'm struggling every day to get up in the morning, but yeah, I end up staying up late anyway. So it's like, would you not just use the evening time to kind of work on your writing? So that's just a me thing, rather than the prescriptive how everyone should write, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean that's super important. It's part of like I think the project of this podcast is trying to find out the ways in which each individual works, because I think writing looks so simple, especially when it's done well. It's difficult to work out why it takes so long to do it well. But that's why. It's because it's not just writing in your own voice or deciding on your genre or your topics of interest. It's how you write, it's when you write, it's the material you respond to. It's all of that constantly.
Yeah, it's like the whole like the thing where it's like you have to write your own voice kind of thing. Like I think that's kind of true, but then also I think at a certain point it comes like you have to write in your own voice, but not necessarily how you actually talk, but how you would want the tale to be told. Like it's not. I think, and that kind of comes through the cultivation of writing a lot. Like it's kind of like getting down to your own process is a very tricky thing, I guess, because you just have to. There's a lot of introspection, I guess, and a lot of time spent by yourself doing it. So, yeah.
Well, I think we're going to talk about the story that you've got published in this great anthology recently, but also like if you're aiming for markets like that, that's really helped me, because it's like, yes, you have to kind of write in your own voice, but you also have to understand that you're going to be in an anthology with lots of different writers, and it's tiring for a reader, I think, to constantly adjust in their head from one writing style to another. And so to write kind of commercially, you have to just be very clear, and you have to find space within a conventional structure to add your flavor to it, but it's not the whole thing that's going into that story. Do you find something?
Yeah, I what like you're saying there, it kind of resonates with something I've been thinking about lately. Like because now like I have this is my first story that's out, and like I'm very proud of it being published. And I'm kind of like I kind of feel the momentum of being like I could have more stuff published, because it's achievable. And I'm kind of like looking at magazines I enjoy and reading them, and I'm starting to become aware of things I'm sure people have been telling me for years, but just excuse me, it never kind of like clicked, of like just reading a magazine and kind of understanding that their magazine has this kind of voice, and that their stories are these lengths, and they deal with these kinds of certain subject matters. Not to say that they're limited or anything, but there's definitely like a flavor to these things. And I think I'm slowly kind of starting to realize, that would help. That might, I'm not publishing these magazines, but like that might help if I started writing, or if I wrote a story for this magazine in this kind of style. And I'm all about the whole kind of making sure that like you're writing something that is a story that's well suited for the market that you want it to be in. And yeah, that's stuff that's as you're talking there, like it all makes a lot of sense, because it's all kind of stuff I'm thinking about more recently. Whereas before I would have been kind of like, I'll just write whatever story in any style I want. But now I'm kind of more thinking about it consciously, of like, well, what kind of story would work for XYZ magazine? It's just, I think maybe there's a part of me that like rebels against it because it seems less romantic to write like that, but also I just want to be read more. So I don't know.
Well, these are things we all think about, and while not compromising artistic integrity, of course. How do you do all these different objectives consciously? You just can't.
Yeah. It's more like it's more of a thing you can like think to yourself about. But I always think of this David Milch quote. He's the guy who wrote like Deadwood, where he's just like, everything you tell yourself about writing when you're not writing is bullshit, because it's just when you get down to it, like it becomes a completely different thing. But when you talk about it and you theorize about it, it's this, you can really craft it in your mind, and it just doesn't really end up like that.
No, absolutely not. I think that all good writing just comes out of the creative process, which is just sitting down and writing day after day. Like I find when I'm writing, it's constantly scary as well. How could you possibly feel like I don't know, no matter how much you're never accessing all of it at once. So you never feel like you know very much. So the idea that you could sit down and write something of value, like 1,000, 2,000 words a day, say, just off the top of your head, seems always ridiculous, I think.
Yeah.
Always scary. But
do you work like that? Would you go for like a word count a day kind of thing, or what's your kind of thing? No?
I think like I'm a lot more confident as a writer now, such that I've never been good at being told what to do, and I certainly can't tell myself what to do either.
Right.
It's kind of why I started. Nobody asks you to write, right?
Yeah.
There's so many writers, so something tells you to start writing, and it's not. It's kind of subconscious. So I don't know why I would then feel like I could take over it. So a good example is what happened at the beginning of this year. Like I always take a break over Christmas, and so I started writing again, and I was like, right, I have this science fiction story that I've almost completed. Leo, why don't you start writing on that one, because it's almost done. It'll be the easiest thing to start up. And my brain was like, no, I'm not doing that. I was like, okay, why don't you write some horror stories? Those are getting easier, I feel, because you don't need to build the world in the same way you do with sci-fi. You don't need to fact check all the ideas. Why don't you write some horror stories? All right, okay, I'll start writing those. And then my brain was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I want to write some sci-fi stories now. And I was like, wait, what? Like, it was just whatever I told myself to do, even if I was trying to make it easier, my brain was just not going to do it. So no, daily word counts, any kind of limiting, any kind of telling myself anything, I won't do it. But the thing is, like, if I don't do it, I'll just absent-mindedly jot down notes throughout the day. Then suddenly I've met my word count anyway, because this is something I enjoy doing. I'm constantly reading every day. I'm constantly writing every day, because that's just part of who I am. I don't need to restrict it, and I'm bored of the idea of the real writer. I think it's a nonsense term. I don't know who made it up. I don't care. I think everyone has the right to write, and I think that people crack it and do it in their own way over and over again, so
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
that was a big ramble, but thanks for listening.
Oh no. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I do think, like, I think work end today can be a bit kind of shitty, or whatever. I think I heard one time where someone was talking about writing a novel, and they were like, I don't really have a word count, but I like being in that world for a certain period of time every day, so it's always kind of fresh in my head, and I kind of like that more than anything. Like, I think word counts for me are kind of, they're stupid at this point, because it's like you were saying there earlier. You were like, if you're making yourself want to write 1,000 or 2,000 words of good quality writing every single day, and you're expecting that to be good every single day, it's probably not going to happen. Like, but I could definitely, because of my job and because I write all the time, the muscle memory of being able to write very quickly is right there. So if I want to write like 1,000 words in an hour, like that's very, very achievable. But will those 1,000 words be any good? Probably not. Like I'd say it'll be pretty terrible. I'll probably cut out most of them. So like at the moment I'm working on a longer project, and I have a word count, which is more just to kind of get me to sit down and do it. Because like with the whole quarantine thing, I think it's very easy to kind of like, just do absolutely nothing. But yeah, I have like a word count of like 300 words, which is not like, for me personally. I know some people write more and some people write less, whatever, but like 300 words for me is very, very small. So I can kind of be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna write 300 words, and I'll usually sit down for an hour anyway, and like probably spend a lot more time thinking about what I want the story to be and how it to progress, and not worry about my word count so much. I'm more kind of worried about like, well, what can I do to make the story actually interesting to anybody other than me? So yeah, so the whole idea of a real writer thing, as you mentioned there, like I'm totally on board that like it's mostly nonsense, and that you should just kind of like find your own way in the process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like as time goes on, once you've seen yourself finish enough projects, you're going to. I personally never let anything go to waste. I've never given up anything. So I know I'm not going to do that. So then I can take my time with it. And the slower I write, the better quality it is. And I don't know anyone who writes fast well. I know lots of people who write fast, and I know lots of people who publish a lot, but I don't know any of them who do it well. It's like, wow, yeah, you're correct. That's a lot of books. Like, you're really stacking them up there.
Yeah, definitely. There are definitely people there are some people I love that do write a lot. But I think the majority, I do find that when I kind of think about like some people, because I love artists who are prolific, like whether it's Prince or Frank Zappa or whoever, like I love people who just like have a lot to say, I guess, about their particular craft. I know I just mentioned two musicians as opposed to writers, but like, I think there's like, there's just something there about when people are prolific that like, I always kind of get this feeling that they want to say something very particular about via their medium that they've chosen, and that just kind of makes me very excited about them, because I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. I wonder what it is they want to say, or what they want to get out. I think Philip K. Dick is probably the good example, because he just wrote so much, and like a lot of it probably isn't great. Like I haven't read all of it, so I can't say it for certain. But like a lot of it probably isn't fantastic. But like he's very much trying to get towards a greater truth that he himself is very interested in finding, which I just find very interesting.
Yeah. I think that what you're hinting at is the idea that a person's like rate of putting out fiction is dependent on who they are and what they want, what they're trying to get out of the process. And I think that's true. And I think that I don't know. It's tough because in order to just keep writing and in order to keep enjoying the process, I've had to not necessarily give up the idea of making money from this or something, but just ignore it entirely. So
yeah,
all I really focus on is like how good can my day's writing be? It's all I really think about now.
right.
But of course, there are certain considerations towards how much you would have to write if you want to make this your living. But nobody knows what that is anymore. You know, like I love. Do you know Patricia Highsmith?
I know of her, but I've never actually read any of her stuff.
Okay, so she did like The Talented Mr. Ripley, Strangers on a Train.
Right.
Brilliant. And she wrote like, she has like had a crazy prolific output because she wasn't, it was her living and she had to make money from it. But who knows how to do that in this day and age? You know, it's so different. I don't know whether or not it's worth speeding up in order to make more money from writing because it's maybe tougher now than ever to do that for a living. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, there's a lot of writers I like from way back in the day, like the kind of pulp writers, like the noir pulp writers from back in the day. Like David Goodis is one that springs to mind of, or what's that guy's name? Max Brand. I'm probably getting that name wrong, but it's something like, it's not his real name, but it's like he was a pen name for this guy who just wrote like tons and tons and tons of fiction, and he was doing it to support himself as his job. And you know, some of these works are held up as being like, you know, some of the best, you know, fiction, detective fiction ever, and then some of it's obviously like dreck, like it's probably terrible, but like he was just writing it to get paid. So yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, it is kind of like, yeah, it probably is better to put it into perspective of being like, when I go to write, I want something that's enjoyable for me, because as you say, like no one's getting into writing to earn a lot of money. I don't think that's really why people start writing, or I presume it's why 99.9% of people don't start writing. Yeah, because it's not exactly the most lucrative business in the world, but yeah, I know. Yeah, prolificacy is just one of those things that just kind of eternally fascinates me. And yeah, whether the amount of it is good or not is definitely debatable, but yeah, I'm always just kind of frequently excited when someone's like, oh, they've got like 300 published stories. I'm like, well, I probably won't read all of them. I'll probably read like 4 or 5, but like, you know, I'm definitely excited about the fact that they've got tons more.
Yeah.
And then you have like writers who like have one book and then like they blow up and they're amazing. And you're like, oh, wow, that's great. They only need the one book and I already know their class. But there's other writers who have 20 books and you only can't hear about them on book 19. You're like, what is with the market? Like, why don't I hear about these writers earlier? So.
Yeah, absolutely. But like you can't pin any of your self-worth to success in terms of prolificacy or money and fame, because nobody knows how it's working and nobody's in control of it, you know?
Very true.
I think that's the thing I get with having talked to so many writers is like, God, if you want to improve, just stop. Find ways to not beat yourself up about this, because you're not in control in a way that like, in a way you've probably never encountered it, at least that I'd never encountered in any other aspect of life, because I'm an engineer by day. So it was like, I got the good degree, so they gave me a good job, because the good jobs go to the people with a good degree or whatever. But in the world of writing, it's just like anyone's guess, you know?
Yeah, you could be a fantastic writer and no one is ever going to hear of you, or you could be like, yeah, you kind of pulled out a good book. And you know, there's a story that's popped into my head as I started thinking about that. I was do you mind if I start just telling this random story about this?
Yeah, of course. That's what it's for.
I was just thinking about just books that just kind of pop up. I'm not going to start. Well, I was waiting to get on a plane, and there was like this group of people behind me, and this girl started telling her friends about. She really offhandedly, I just heard her being like, "Oh, did I tell you I'm getting the book published?" And her friends were like, "No, I didn't know you wrote. That's amazing." She's like, "Yeah, yeah, I just, I had this idea, and I said it to Julie or Sarah or whatever, and she was like, oh, well, my friend's like an agent at Random House Publishing, and she was like, oh, no way.
Mhm.
I was like, yeah, yeah, and then her friends were kind of like, oh, what's the book about? And this lady basically described like the plot to Eat, Pray, Love, and I was just kind of like,
Okay.
that's mad. That's Eat, Pray, Love. And then it was like, oh, that's really cool. I was like, yeah, yeah. They started stalking. I just thought in like the what's the name of the what? No, but Barnes and Noble. They just saw the bookstore just back there. Like they have it there today, and she was just so excited about it. But like it very much seemed through the conversation that this person had like a very mild passing interest in writing, but now had like a book display back in the bookshop there, and was like just kind of talking offhandedly, and I was like dying inside because I'm like, I don't even have a story published at this point, and it's like I'm like trying to force myself to get up early and write a lot, and it's just like these moments where you're like, God, there's really no telling who is going to be like published and well renowned, because apparently you can just get published quite easily if you know the right people,
Yeah, sure. It could be complete nonsense. She could just be like, yeah, did I not introduce myself? My name is Liz Gilbert. Like, see, there I am on the shelf. It's like, that's not your author photo. It could be complete nonsense, I remember.
Yeah, now you put it like that. Maybe I was bamboozled. I've been lied to.
It's like, I was on the bus in London once, and I heard this bunch of school kids, and one of them was singing, and then she was like, yeah, like I know this DJ, and he's gonna like put my like mixtape on the radio, but I told him like don't do it yet because I want to perfect my voice. And I was sitting there listening to that, reading a book, just being like, wow, that's so like strong of her to want to perfect her voice before that, like, like, wait, it's obviously nonsense. That's not true.
Yeah.
That's why I always tell people. Sorry, that's why I always tell people that like don't get me into politics, because I'll just listen to like the last person I heard and just be like, sounds like an excellent policy he just outlined. Do that, So, I don't know. I think that helps in fiction writing, is to keep an open mind and to be able to see things from multiple characters' perspectives. At least that's what I tell myself and other people.
How do you mean, sorry?
Like, not to make decisions about things, not to have allegiances or strong opinions, because I can't make any. I don't have.
Yeah, I feel like I have the opposite problem. I just have too many strong opinions about things, and then they often end up just like causing me more trouble than it's worth. Like it's always like a case of like I'll be knee deep in an argument, going like, "Why am I here? Why did I start this? I definitely could have stopped this moment." But yeah, the empathy thing, I think, is I think there's that quote about like reading like makes you more empathetic, but like writing like and really trying to get better at it, I think really amps up your empathy to like the worst degree ever, where you're just empathizing with like just plants in your living room, being like, "Must be tough for you, bro."
Yeah. I don't know, because like if I'm writing, like I say, I try to represent different opinions, but I'm doing it because people around me in life seem a lot more confident than I think they should be. So I don't know if it's like an empathetic intention, is to give them a story where it's like, explain this then, if you're so confident.
Yeah, I think I remember being in university, and like when I first started like realizing that people just were full of shit. Like just people who you'd meet people and they'd be like in the bookstore and they'd be looking at the book that you knew that you'd get your class, and you kind of start talking to them, and then months will go by and you're friends with that person, and you kind of mention that first day and be like, yeah, I had no idea what was that, like absolutely not a clue, but I just thought if I stood around long enough, people would kind of think that I knew what was going on. I'm like, yeah, I totally get that. I think that's like the beginning of my being like, wow, everyone is lying all the time, and it's kind of fine, I guess. Yeah.
For me, that really, I worked that one out only like last year in particular. I started like a filmmaking club here because I'm like a self-taught writer, so I figured I can be a self-taught filmmaker. And I just started making stuff with my phone with whoever showed up, and everyone was like, I know the guy you need to, like, they knew less about it than I did, and they were like, I know the guy you need to talk to. You need to set up a limited company. I was like, why are these random people bossing me about how I should do this?
Yeah.
When they know less about it than I do? And like, what are you going to tell all these big networking friends of yours? I know a guy who owns a phone that he wants to
He's got the Connect, man. He's got that phone.
Nobody else knows the app. You know, it's only been downloaded by like 100,000 people. Like, you know, and that was the one for me. But it was also like, how many of these people are not doing what they want to in life because they're too afraid of, I don't know, looking silly or not being able to do it at first? Like, who's able to do anything well at first? Like, why is that a good reason not to do something? You know?
Yeah, I think it's usually like how much embarrassment you can tolerate at the beginning of something is like that's why, like, I think writing is probably like a good thing, and why some people probably get into it. It's because it's just you're by yourself most of the time, and you can kind of work on it slowly and until you feel confident enough to be like, look at my story. Whereas other stuff where you kind of have to be in front of other people is just like stuff where people like stand-up comedy. Like, I would never do stand-up comedy ever, because I would be so bad at it to begin with, because you have to be in front of someone to get good at it. So I definitely think maybe there's an element of that, like, but the whole like the film thing is funny, because when I was in Japan, there was a film competition in Toyama where I lived, and like people just started just being kind of like, I got a phone, I'll make a movie, and like some of the films were just terrible. Like just some of the worst ones are, but like they were great because people were like trying to make movies, which is like the really fun part, and because everyone was so like supportive, it was like a very kind of like, you keep doing it even if it wasn't great. You still be like, that was great, do more, and like it's this kind of I guess echo chamber of like, you can do it, you know, which is definitely what you need when you start off with these things. Did you have when you started writing, did you have like a writers group or anything like that to like kind of keep you going, or were you just always writing as a thing?
I started writing a novel, but I didn't get the structure right, because I should have started off smaller. I would definitely advise people to just write short stories and send those out, and send them out to a group of, you know, other writers, especially like if you're starting out and they're starting out, great, then you'll all learn together. You're all at the same stage. You know, you'll all get better at the same rate. You should be seeking out people at your level to begin with. So yeah, it took me a while to get around to that. I think because of that embarrassment thing. It's like, please don't tell me I'm bad at this, even though I just started. But that's a question of being young as well, I think. I don't know that I really care about being bad at something or about being laughed at either, because when I've had, we all end up with a share of snarky rejections, unfortunately, but everyone I've received, I've been like, you're a dick for being snarky about this, you know? Why should I feel bad about you being a dick, you know?
Oh, right. You've gotten actual like rejection things that are snarky?
Oh, awful stuff.
Oh,
but then I just feel I feel bad for the people who've sent them to me. Like, why on earth do you think you can write something like that to another human being, you know?
Yeah.
And the ones at the very top, like if you submit to the very top magazines and you're lucky enough to get a personalized rejection, they're always lovely. Like, of course they are, because you don't get to that level without being kind to everyone you meet, I don't think, you know? Yeah. Everything about faking it till you make it, like, it's just nonsense. I don't know who came up with that. It's kind of what I'm trying to learn, what motivates different people, because whatever motivates them in particular is how they should be. If you're not somebody who naturally fakes it until they make it, don't do that, you know? Just especially because this is all about authenticity anyway. Aim for that instead.
Yeah.
Bit of a ramble as well, but
hey man, I think the vibe here is just like lots of rambles back and forth where you're like, that's a good ramble. I'll be like, I've got a better ramble. Let me ramble more at you.
that's the whole thing we're doing here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I just completely blanked on what you just said. Authenticity.
I don't think it was an interesting point anyway.
No, you mentioned authenticity, and I was just thinking about the whole writing your own voice thing, and how like the whole write your own voice thing I found when I started writing was that my internal monologue voice was just like me doing an impression of a writer I liked, like
Hmm.
adopting like an accent in my head, and then that, and I'll be like, that's how I write. That's how I speak, but it's not how I actually speak. And yeah, I think that the authenticity thing is like so hard because I don't think anyone really knows who they are, which is like
Hmm.
the most Lifetime movie thing I could have said in this entire interview. But yeah, I think there's definitely like an element of that there with the authenticity. I've said authenticity about 20 times in the last 30 seconds.
It was super authentic.
Yeah.
But no, definitely. I think when you start writing, you're like, that's like a sentence I've read in a book. You're like, yeah,
Yes.
someone else's book. Like it's
Yeah.
not what you do. And I think I'm reading this book now about directing actors, which is really interesting because I assumed that as an actor, you have to think about the emotions you're going to be feeling at every stage. But actually, the strategy for good acting seems to be to distract somebody by giving them an objective that has very little to do with what they're saying, to let the authentic voice out instead. And so I feel like in order to write in your own voice, you have to drop the notion of attempting to do that and just kind of follow an idea and assume it will fall out in a way that you write.
Yeah.
I think it's sorry.
No. I was thinking about that concept of like, so you're distracting the other person that you're acting with, you're distracting yourself, the actor, with
Well, the
something.
thing is, like, if you were to say a line like, I don't know, like, I found the emails where you were talking about me, something. I would assume that as an actor, you would say, right, I'm hurt in this moment, so I have to act hurt. But trying to control your emotions is apparently a way to just make yourself self-conscious about them and not let them out. So instead, you should try and say this line like you're trying to make the other person laugh. Give them some sort of active objective to do with the person that they're talking to. Try and make them laugh, or try and make them feel your pain, or try and, I don't know, try and demean them by saying it. And then by having some sort of objective to influence the other performer, that way whatever emotions come out organically by not paying attention to them. It seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But I think something like that applies to writing as well. There's a lot you have to ignore in order to let it happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I really like that. I love hearing about like particularly acting. I always think there's like, again, it's just something I probably wouldn't do, but like it just sounds like something where like you have to juggle a lot. But probably when you're doing it, I think like when we were talking at the start, I was mentioning about the theorizing about writing, but then you probably theorize by acting a lot. But once you're in it, you probably just have to kind of go with your instinct a lot.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. Yeah, there's I am a fiend for like reading like craft books. I'm all about crafted writing books. They're like the ultimate form of procrastination for myself. But one thing like that I'm just like I struck on and it's really helped me in this novel draft I'm doing at the moment is like the idea of like a contradiction at all times, of a contradiction of like a character feeling something or moving like as you say, like trying to get a particular response from another character but feeling a different thing, and that kind of like being their, I guess, conflict internally, which is for me revelatory, but I'm sure like for other people it's very kind of like obvious. So yeah, that's been like a really fun thing to be playing with.
No, that makes sense. I think that like the reason we have to read so many different strategies is you have to find the one that resonates with you, the one way that you think about what you're doing, and you're also constantly adapting that by learning new theories and ideas always, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because like when I'm like writing, I'll think about something that I read like a year ago and be like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense now. Whereas when I read it, it didn't really make any sense to me at all. Whereas now I'm like, I totally get it because I'm doing that exact thing, and that can start becoming a part of the thing that I do. But yeah, I am all about the whole kind of reading up on how to do something before you actually do it. That is just an ingrained part of my personality. It's probably a terrible trait to have, but I can't stop doing it. Like even when I was like learning how to drive last year, I only just learned how to drive last year. And 30 years old, finally got there. And Yeah, but like before I even got into a car, I was like reading about how to start a car. Like it's just like being like, when I get into that car, I'm gonna turn that key in the ignition like you won't believe, because that's like how I have to go about learning anything. But
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's a balance, I guess. Like, I particularly, when I have a new writing project, I'm just like, this seems a bit like a story I read last year. Okay, I can't start my story until I've read that story from last year 3 times. And then it's like, no, I think you're just scared of typing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. There's the book I'm writing at the moment. Like I it's nothing like the book that I'm thinking of, but I was just like, I love that book. I gotta go back and start reading that book and really get to grips with like what they were doing so that I can kind of do it, but a little bit different. But I managed to stop myself from doing it, but I'm still thinking about I will get to that book at some point. But I find for myself, I don't know how your process works in terms of like research or anything like that. But last year I had like the first kind of it was an anthology I was submitting to, and the story kind of required a bit of research. So I started like getting books and reading articles and doing all these things. Be like I'm researching, and like I read a lot. But I noticed that none of the stuff that I was reading really kind of came through at the time. It took like months later when it was kind of like I kind of like congealed in my head into some form of like a story that it kind of came out then. But like initially, like the research element does not help me at all because I will just end up writing the story that I was going to write anyway, and it takes like quite a while for new information to really sink in. I know.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because what you're doing and what people are coming to you for is your use of imagination. It's not about the facts that you can collect. And I don't know. It's like I did research for a thing recently, but I really enjoyed it because I realized that I no longer felt the need to hide behind facts anymore. It was just like, well, if this is relevant, it's going to show up. I'm not going to feel like I haven't done enough work because if it doesn't appear in the story, maybe the story doesn't need it anyway, you know?
Yeah. That was like, because the thing I was like reading about was like a lot of like reading into like psychotropic drugs from like South America and be like, yeah, I really need to read this book so that I can really get to grips with that. But it just like, it made like absolutely had no impact on the story that I wrote whatsoever. But then at the end of last year, I wrote a book, I wrote a story, and like it, like there was like a strain within that story where I was like, oh yeah, I could really use that information that I learned 8 months ago now because it's actually something I can creatively think about as opposed to just like inserting to be like, look at me, I know a thing. So
yeah, definitely. I think that everything that we read and everything that we practice writing always shows up again later in some form. Like it's not that it's never a waste, but you can't predict what's going to be useful and what isn't. So I wouldn't feel like, I think again, when I was younger, I used to feel like, oh my God, I'm reading this, but it doesn't seem to be relevant anymore. I have to stop reading this right now if I want to succeed. And like, oh, what? You know, nobody really knows. Nobody knows.
How do you feel about it? Like I'm a pretty slow reader, so I kind of often fall behind like the best new books or the best new novellas, whatever it's said, and I kind of it'll be like, oh, have you heard, like I can't even think of a book off the top of my head, but it'll be like this is the best haunted house story ever, and as soon as I hear that, I'm like, what's the first haunted house story? Like, what's the first big one? And I'll go back like Burnt Off by Robert.
Or like. How dare I feel like I can write a haunted house story until I've read the entire body of work of Edgar Allan Poe?
Yes.
No, again, it's procrastination. I think that like the things that have helped me get better as a writer more than anything are practice and life experience. You can't do anything but life experience. That just happens. So just practice. Like that's the best thing. As for like how much you read, well, always be reading. And that'll take care of itself. What can you do more than that, you know? But this is not something that you can catch up with. And I really do, you know, when you hear things like art is subjective and writing is subjective and so on, it feels like a cop out to try and make everyone feel good, but it also just happens to be true. I think a lot of the stuff that makes the best lists of what's the best story, I like almost none of it, and I think that's probably an asset to me having an original voice. Not one that gets published often, but one that is original at least. It's not. What can you do about Sorry.
You said no, sorry, I'm interrupting you. You were saying earlier that you're like, oh, okay, I don't really have the. I'm sure you have opinions, but I think you were kind of saying like, I don't have these strong opinions, and it's just like, well, you just said you hate all the books on the best of lists, so clearly you do have like a very strong idea of like what is a good story or what is a good piece of art.
Well, not something I'm in control of. Again, I think that you don't know what resonates with you or what doesn't, and I don't know why it is that I don't like almost everything I read, but maybe that's why you write as well, is because you're not finding what you enjoy often. Yeah. Whereas before I would have felt like, wow, if I don't enjoy so much of what I'm reading, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not as part of this world as I thought I was. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I totally get that. Like, I feel that sometimes when like I'm reading like a book that's like the book, and it's or even seeing a movie, or like it could be anything, but I won't be really kind of engaging with it, or it won't be resonating with me. I kind of think like, maybe I just don't have good taste. Like, part of me that's just like, oh, maybe you're just a complete idiot. Like you never had anything. But yeah, I think it takes a bit of kind of striving to realize that maybe not everything's for everyone, I suppose.
No, definitely not. I mean, like, your taste is an original synthesis of all the stuff that's out there, so it's going to seem weird if it's original, because it's going to feel like it's all over the shop. My sister is like famous for this. Like, I never know what to recommend her, and like whatever films she enjoys always just seems it's a complete mystery to both of us. It's such a random collection of stuff, and it's like, well, if you like this, I assume you would like that. And she's like, no, I hate that. But it's you don't choose your taste. And as long as you enjoy some stuff that you read, then good,
Yeah. I think I always just find it like bizarre that like there'll be like, because I always take a lot of my reading suggestions from like writers I really like, and they'll be like, oh, well, this was the best book I read last year, and I'll read that book, and more often than not, I'll be kind of like, this is terrible. Like, this is an objectively bad story or whatever. But then often sometimes like, stuff is wonderful and fantastic, and I'm really excited about it. But yeah, it's finding what you actually really care about, I think is hard.
Well, when they said it was a highly subjective industry, they weren't kidding. Like,
yeah, they certainly weren't. Yeah.
It's I don't know. But yeah, no, I mean, also, whatever is supposed to be the best book that a particular author wrote is rarely the one of theirs that I like the best as well. Yeah. Do you find that?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but nothing is coming to mind because that's what it's like for me. There's always like, I always just find like there would be like a movie, or like the movies are coming to my head quicker, but like there was a film that came out a couple years ago. I'm not gonna name any films because I don't want to rag on any movies or whatever, but like there was a movie that came out, and it's super popular horror movie, and I just watched it. I thought it was absolute garbage, and I kind of like, and the people who were kind of like touting it as being really good would be kind of like my friends in the writing community. So I was kind of like, they like it for the writing, or there's something about it that resonates for writers, perhaps, was my thinking. And I kind of just said to my mates who don't write, and they were just, no, it's the greatest movie ever. Like it's wonderful. Like, it's the most fantastic thing that's ever happened in the history of cinema. I'm just kind of blown away. I continually get in arguments about it, but it's just, it's so weird to find like things that just don't resonate with you so hard when everybody else is seemingly like really connected to it.
Sometimes you can just be like, what planet am I on? Who are these people? Like, what's going? It can really throw you existentially sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And because even like with people like I would share like 99% like we love the same things, and then it's this one thing, and I'm like, but how do you not see this being objectively terrible?
But it's also why like, and we haven't done it. I don't enjoy discussing books with other people. Like, I don't do it often.
Yeah.
Because I don't like. when people are like, all right, sell me that book, explain to me why that was good. It's like, I can't do that. It's a waste of time as well. And also like we're talking about, there's so many ways to hide from trying to be a good writer, and one of them is feeling like you understand a great body of literature, and that arguing about it with somebody else is a good use of your time that makes you a better writer. Because I don't think it is. It's just an interesting pastime.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when you do kind of say it like that, it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, books are just meant to be read. Like, it's kind of like ruins like your whole like existential crisis over what your next plot point should be. You're like, yeah, I guess doesn't really matter in the long run.
Does anything anyone does?
Yeah. I guess not. I'm trying not to freak myself too much out on a Saturday afternoon, but yeah, I guess in the long run, most things don't mean absolutely anything.
It's important to be kinder to yourself in quarantine week 3, I think, but everyone's heading that way.
Yeah. Everyone realized that there's no point to absolutely anything.
Yeah, agreed. So let me talk about your story. Tell me about your story in this anthology.
My story is called Mouths Filled with Seawater. I was trying to explain the plot the other day to somebody, but it just sounds like a Lifetime movie. Like it has that kind of feel to it. But basically, it's about, I wrote it when I came back from Japan, so it's inflected with a lot of me being kind of like, I'm lost in the world. But the story is about this girl. She comes back to her hometown, and her memory is quite messed up, I guess, and she becomes obsessed with this girl in her town who she may or may not be connected to, and that girl is a visual artist. And throughout the story, you're kind of getting clues about maybe your narrator isn't the most reliable person in the world, and perhaps the visual artist has more of a connection to the narrator than you thought. And yeah, it's very creepy.
So, inspired by how you felt when you came back from Japan?
Yeah, because I was living in Japan for about 4 years, and then I moved back to my hometown, and yeah, it's just a weird experience. It was very reverse culture, shocky, so it was kind of strange for the first while. So I ended up just kind of writing the story. It came there really quickly. I remember like I wrote it. It was like maybe like 4 or 5 days. I think I wrote it in. And I was that's very quick for me, and. So I wrote that, and then I was kind of like, oh, and then I don't know if you can share the feeling of like you do something so quickly and you think it's quite good, but because it happened so quickly, you're like, it's probably not that good because you did. So I was kind of sitting on that story for about a year, I think, before I really did anything with it after.
Yeah, no, I think that well, again, we were talking about prolificacy and how fast you're supposed to write and how slowly. I mean, I don't really know, but yeah, like you, I'm suspicious if it comes out fast, but also if it does, that often means it's just, sometimes they come out fully formed, sometimes they don't,
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
Someone was saying something one time where it's like, some stories, like, it was Joe Lansdale, it's like some stories bleed out of you, but some stories are like building a chair. And it's like, that's kind of cool. I like
that's a good point.
Yeah, that kind of craftsman idea about like how you're actually meant to go about writing a story most of the time.
So have you, in the story, do you feel like you've incorporated the mood of where you live?
Yeah, I think I have, because I started writing really focusing on writing, I guess, in like 2013. So I wrote the story about 2017, and up to that point I've been writing stories. And I think I showed the story to a friend of mine, and I kind of just asked, like, where do you think this story is set? And they were kind of like, oh, I don't know, like some small town in America. And I kind of realized at that point that I was writing a lot of stories that were set in this kind of Stephen King universe, where like it was all this kind of nondescript small town in the United States. And at that point, I'd never actually even been in America. So I was kind of, I started to kind of realize I should probably focus more on like writing stories that were like more resonant with actual Irish culture. And there's a writer I really love called Usman T. Malik. And he has a short story in a book called Exigencies, and the story is set in Pakistan, and like he's not afraid to like bring in like references to Pakistani life and culture, and it's all kind of like it gives us this real kind of like I guess like immediate feel of like it's actually in a different place, as opposed to a lot of stories that can kind of just feel like they're being explained too much. Like he would use like a word that I would have no familiarity with, so I would kind of be like, oh, I'd have to kind of go and look it up. Like that's just me because I would want to look up what that word means. But just like the idea of being unafraid of being like of using your own culture as much as you want, like really resonated with me. So since that point, I think that maybe Medfield Water was like the first story that I started to be like, I'm going to make this more Irish than I would have been normally comfortable with, because I often find that like there'd be some Irish writers that I find reading kind of not nauseating, but like a little bit nauseating, because it feels like there's a very kind of and this isn't every Irish writer, but like there's definitely a certain strand of Irish literature which skews towards like this kind of twee feeling, where everything just is a bit kind of diddly-eye, diddly-do. And I hate that with an absolute passion. And especially because I've been in Japan for 4 years, where they have so many Irish bars where it's like, you know, the proper green leprechauns at the door, like terrible trad music playing over the speakers, and you're just like, and I was just kind of so sick of that. I wanted to write something that just really felt like Ireland to me, or like how I interpret Ireland being. Yeah, so yeah, a very long-winded answer to you asking if it felt a bit Irish. It's like, yeah, it does.
No, it's a very useful explanation, because I think that how Ireland seems to you is your asset, and it's something that you take for granted. Something that all of us take for granted, I think, is you're like, oh yeah, well, like me, I'm from Glasgow in Scotland. It's like, well, that would never be interesting to anyone. Like everywhere else is interesting, and you're like, no, you're just more familiar with the place around you. But if you examine it more closely, you'll see things that are done specifically in that way that you could enhance a story by making it more specific and give it more, you know, more resonance, more layers by, you know, making it more specific to a location.
Yeah, there's definitely that like kind of like there's a phrase that I think nothing of this, but that getting that specific, that specificity in your writing, I think really makes things pop. And like, if you know where the place that you're writing about very well, you can obviously get very specific, and then your own interpretations of that layered on top of it just make it just more, just a better work of fiction, I think. And I hope that that's coming through in my writing the last couple of years more. Definitely something that I focus on.
And it must have been easier for you to see what those things that were specific about Ireland, you know, life there, what those were after you came back from Japan.
Yeah, it was weird. It was like the reverse culture shock thing was absolutely bizarre. Like I was talking to all my friends about this, and I think we thought that maybe I might have had dementia or something like that, because I came home, and you know, it was in Japan, and basically like I got rid of like all my Irish slang while I was there, and I would make my sentences like quite
simplistic or something.
Simplistic, yeah. And then kind of like there would be Japanese sprinkled in. Like I was never like a great speaker of Japanese, but I could speak like a little bits and pieces, and like that would kind of like be like just dotted throughout my language. So when I came home and like everyone's like speaking in slang and everyone speaks 90 miles an hour, like that for the first few months, like I just felt like I couldn't really keep up with any conversation. So there was a real kind of like going out and meeting people in the pub and stuff like that, and being really outside of everything else. I think that definitely gave me like a real perspective on like what things actually felt like in a very alien kind of manner. So I think that came through in the story as well.
Yeah. Do you feel like your personality changed
from being in Japan?
Yeah, or were you different over there?
Yeah, I think so. I think it made me more calm, I think, as a person, just because I was living by myself and I was in a town with like, I think I was the only English speaker in the town of 40,000 people. And so, yeah, so you kind of have to like understand that you're the bottom rung of the ladder, and then kind of, you know, conduct yourself appropriately because you're in somebody else's country, and kind of like, you know, I think you start taking things like a bit slower. And I think even like my sister and my mother came over to visit me maybe a couple of years after I'd been there, and they were just kind of like, my sister in particular was just like, oh, like you're just like so much more calm and like level. And now whether I've maintained any of that calmness since I've returned home, I'm not sure. But like at the time, she was like, oh, like you're definitely like not as kind of I don't know what the word for it is, but just definitely a more kind of calm kind of person. So yeah, I think it definitely changed me because, and even like you were speaking, and I was speaking in Japanese, like again, not a great speaker, but I'd have to speak and try my best, and you kind of like you focus more on what you're saying, and kind of you're more patient with other people because you know that they're trying their best to speak to you in a way that you can understand. So yeah, definitely a lot of changes for sure. Would you find similarly that living in Norway has changed how you are?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Glasgow, I would say, is kind of, it's not that it's like a different kind of friendliness, right? I mean, everyone in Glasgow, you can walk up to them and they'll have a chat with you as if you're friends. Was here in Norway, everyone kind of leaves you alone in a nice way. It's like it's two different forms of politeness in two different countries. But I'm more like people in Stavanger, Norway, than I am people in Glasgow, I find, and therefore like it feels like a place that's more homogeneous with people like me, and that's not necessarily a good thing, like everyone just leaving each other alone for too long. That's what it feels like.
Right.
So yeah, it's a very unique culture. I mean, my brother lives in Japan, and I think that
cool.
If there's any kind of similarity in our experience, it's living in a country with a culture that's so strong that you'll never really be part of it.
Yeah, there definitely is that. Probably like one of the main reasons I came home.
Yeah, it's like, so, the way of being, I don't know what a kinder word than zealotry is for it, but like the way to help you out is to make you as Norwegian as possible. Speak our language, eat our food, like climb up the mountains, go skiing. These are things that will make you, like, we all agree that will make you a better person, like a happier person, because it makes all of us happy, rather than being like, you're different, I'm going to meet you on your terms. There's not much understanding of that, particularly here in Stavanger, more so than Oslo, that was a bit more internationally minded. But that's fine. It's fine for me. Like before I came back to Stavanger, I was flying to this little island where there was a yard where I was helping them with engineering work there, and lots of people were like, I don't understand how you can live there. Like, no, it's so tiny. You don't see anyone. And I was like, listen, I mostly stay indoors and read books. It doesn't matter to me particularly where I am in the world. So people are always just like, what's it like? What's that place like? And I'm like, well, they had a roof. I was under it. I read some books. So I think, like, as a writer now, I've given myself permission not necessarily to always set stories in particular locations, because a lot of the stories I tell don't need particular locations, because I'm more spend a lot of time in my own head,
Right.
And that's okay. I think that I would encourage all writers to try and consider how to incorporate where they live into their stories. But if you're anything like me, you're not really paying attention.
So which is totally fine. I think like it's not even a case of I'd never be prescriptive enough to be like, oh, everyone should set stories in the place they're from or anything like that. But just more like, for me, I knew that I kept on reading stories set in Ireland and I hated them. Like, I just hated reading them. I hated, like, because even when they were referencing stuff that I knew, I was like, you're just making it sound way crappier than it actually is. Like, there's just a real element of like, everyone settle down, I'll do this much better. Like, that's kind of how I almost felt. I wanted like write my settings or to improve my settings or make them more kind of like make them more like the Ireland that I think I understand a bit better. I think the last story I wrote that I was quite proud of, I think I set in 16th century Germany. So that was a bit different. So I tried to do something that was a bit different with that one. But like, I think like sensitive place is always kind of like a fun thing to explore. But when you're saying like, they're not set, your stories, they're not set anywhere particular, is that because you're just not thinking of a particular place, or just you're making up a place, or what kind of, how does that work in terms of your settings, I guess?
Because I think that like the human behavior that I'm writing about is universal and timeless in a lot of cases, and therefore it doesn't necessarily matter where it takes place. And in fact, if I don't give it a place, and I'm suggesting that it happens everywhere, it can be more powerful in some circumstances. Like if you're writing science fiction, you're writing about how a concept might play out, and it might be a concept that doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, then where is it going to exist? Like maybe it could crop up anywhere. Who knows who's going to get it first, or if it's ever going to exist, you know? So in stories like that, location doesn't matter as much, and I can get it out faster. It's like sometimes I do set science fiction stories like in specific locations, and then I do try and incorporate what people in that culture are like. And when you do that, you can make a stronger story. But you know, where you achieve the density of a good story can come from setting in a particular location. In terms of the science fiction I write, I suppose in particular, the density comes from the density of the made-up ideas of the science fiction concepts. If that makes sense. So I think that like what.
So do you primarily write sci-fi? Is that science fiction? Is that what you mostly write?
It's kind of at the moment it's half that and half horror.
Okay. It kind of strikes me a little bit when you're describing it. Sorry, I keep putting you off.
Go for it.
And when you're describing it, it makes me think of like a Thomas Ligotti story or like a Brian Evanson story where it feels like it could be anywhere. But I don't know if that's like what your style is, right? But that's my reference points as you're speaking there.
I see your point. Yeah, and those are good examples of writers where, and particularly Evanson, like the otherworldliness comes from the fact that you don't know where these things are happening. So it can be an advantage sometimes. Nobody knows anything, I guess. And try stuff out, you know? Try stuff out.
Really landmark moments in this. We've said nothing means anything. In the long run, nothing really matters. Yeah, we probably should write down like a list of our.
Also, how you were talking, it seemed like what you were saying was that what made you calmer in Japan was learning that you're not you in particular, but just like people aren't that special to one another, you know?
Yeah, that is true. I think
it's a nice thing.
It's definitely is a nice thing to have realized. I think one of the things I really gravitated towards, and it's such a, like you were saying at one point, you were like, yeah, I hate being told what to do. And it's like, yeah, I also hate being told what to do. But in Japan, there's like a real sense of hierarchy. And I really enjoyed the sense of hierarchy where I'm like, I know where I stand in relation to everything else. And that gave me some weird sense of calm where I'm like, yeah, I know that I'm not in charge of this. So I'm not going to really worry about it because I am a lower rung on the ladder because that guy's in charge or that lady's in charge. Or, you know, it just, that made me feel a bit more kind of like secure in where I was.
Yeah.
Which is just not and then I think I came home and I think I was talking to somebody about it and I was like, yeah, I love this aspect of this, and people were like, you like being told what to do? And I was like, not that I like being told what to do, but like I like knowing where I am. I think that makes it easier for me to kind of navigate my day to day.
Yeah, definitely. I think that like at least I experience it as growing up as an adult, like you feel very powerful and special the younger you are, and then like when you see how much effort it takes to get stuff done and how much it just like doesn't pan out often, and that's not your fault. It's nice in a way because it's like it's not like you don't feel as responsible for, I don't know, your own successes and failures, I suppose. And that's a nice thing, as opposed to a message that seems to be very common now, which is like everyone's involved, nobody's too small, and everyone can achieve stuff. You're like, shit, what should I be achieving? What should I be doing? Where should I be going? I don't know.
Yeah, I do think that whole kind of feeling of like, yeah, everyone has to achieve all the time is a very, I guess it's intrinsically a very capitalist idea to be kind of like, I am always achieving more and I'm always doing more, but it's like you don't have to, like, no one has to do anything if they want to do it. Like if you don't want to write, you don't have to write. Like, you know, if you don't want to make art, you don't have to do it. Like as we said, like no one's asking us to do any of these things. Like you don't have to do it if you don't want to. But there's obviously some kind of like inner need to just kind of give it a go, I guess.
I think that's another excellent point that we've landed on for this podcast, that you don't have to write.
You don't
write podcast. You have to do this. No, like if you might feel you've got this great novel inside you, but if it never came out, no one would notice.
It's very true. Like, yeah, it would make absolutely no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, and you know, if it came out, maybe no one would notice anyway. So chill out.
This is a depressing episode of this podcast.
I don't know if you choose to see that in a depressing way. I suppose it is, but it's also true.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh God.
Trying to figure out anywhere else to go with that. Yeah. don't want
Neither. Oh, that's what I wanted to ask. Did you meet Kelly Robson?
I didn't meet Kelly Robson. I signed up to Richard Thomas's Day of Reckoning class, which is like an all-day kind of event of like different lectures by different writers. So Kelly Robson was one, Priya Sharma was another, Lily Llewellyn, Gabino Iglesias. I'm definitely missing something. Lucy Snyder. There's somebody else in it. Sarah Reed. There was a bunch of really great writers, like kind of just giving their own kind of like lectures / talk on like an aspect of writing. So Kelly Robson was one, and she was discussing her story. It's the one on tour. A Human Stain or Human Stain?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Discussing that, which was actually really interesting. But there was real. Have you read that story yet?
Yeah.
It's not in the story, but someone was asking about like what the things in the water are, or what those are, and then I won't tell anybody because I don't want to be the person that's telling him. But the answer was just like so bonkers, and kind of like, wait, that's not in the story. I just remember just being like, it was one of those things where she told us what those things were, but it has no place in the story, or at least when I read it, I don't remember it being. I just read the story, and I can remember being like, right, okay, I didn't pick up on that, but I don't think it's necessary to pick up on that to enjoy the story, because the story is like it has a whole different arc than you needing to know that. But I remember just thinking like, it just goes to show you that you can think whatever you want about your own story, but it doesn't make a difference if it's not actually in the story.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I find when I'm writing first drafts, sometimes I can have like whole conversations between characters where I feel like I understand their relationship to one another really well, so much better, and then I just delete it later because I'm like, it's not. Now I know how they feel about one another, but it's not part of the story, or at least it might inform their interactions, but it doesn't. The exact conversation where I learned about that with them isn't part of it, you know.
I do think like that stuff is like really key and important, and like for providing depth for yourself, I think more than anything, just to kind of like give yourself that kind of like, this is like interesting, and I can definitely make my story stronger by knowing it. But I also think like at the end of the day, like the thing that you are showing people in the story that's there, like if people like I as part of a workshop like recently enough, and I submitted the story, and there was a character and their motivation, like they were discussing the motivation of that character, and they're like, oh, it must be this, and I was like, oh no, it's clearly, and I gave them what I thought as the writer was their motivation, and they were just kind of, that's not in the story, like you haven't kind of explained that or even hinted at that, so that can't be the motivation. It's one of those things where it can help you as the writer, but when people start reading it, they are bringing their own interpretations and their own ideas. And if you haven't shown them what you want to show them, it doesn't really matter what you think to yourself, or at least that's what I think. Maybe like what you know about your own story doesn't really matter if you haven't told people.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think that you're leaving space for other people's interpretations. As long as you've got the series of events down. That's the main thing, you know. How much explanation you need to go into it, I don't know. I'm writing something at the moment for our club to act out, and it's about conspiracy theories, that each character has one. And I said, well, look, I need one of these theories to be correct so that I know what the plot is. But I can take out all the evidence after the fact for who was correct. And I think that's going to work in this case, and I think that's the best way to go about it. It doesn't really matter, though. I know that I don't know. I know some people who don't like it when all the information isn't provided. They feel that it's like missing. You know, the writer hasn't done their job, but I don't agree.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel, but last year, that story I said I did a lot of research for it was a Sherlock Holmes story. It was for like Sherlock Holmes anthology. And I wrote the story. I got super into Sherlock Holmes, read all the stuff. Man, Sherlock Holmes is great. I read all that stuff, and like, and I'd written this first draft, and I kind of like gave it to people, and they were like, yeah, like, you know, it's all right, like, but you know, you don't really kind of, the mystery isn't in the story. Like, I kind of, the way that it kind of unraveled, there was stuff happening, I guess, like off page that people weren't privy to. So the ending, they didn't feel was justified because they didn't have all the information leading up to it. So they couldn't guess the ending. So then I rewrote it so that like you technically could work out the central mystery of it. And I thought it was really kind of like fun. I was like, yeah, that's a great way to write it. And anyway, the story didn't get accepted in the anthology, so obviously it wasn't a great story. But like, I just recently reread it, and I see all the clues, and I was like, I don't know if that's good or not. Like, just having the clues in there, for me, it kind of seems a bit heavy-handed, and maybe almost like a bit of an antiquated way of writing. Like, maybe that's not really how fiction should be now. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about it, and I'm not really sure how to approach making that into something else, because I'm like, should I leave it in there? Should I leave that mystery as a thing? Or yeah.
Well, you said something that isn't true, which is it wasn't accepted, therefore it's not good. That's not true. You know?
Well, yeah, you're very right. Thank you very much. Yeah, maybe it's not. It just wasn't suitable for the anthology. I think the exact words of the editor was like, "There's definitely a good story in here, but it needs a bit more editing." And I was like, "Oh, fair enough." But it was one of those things that I just for some reason got really wrapped up in for like a couple of months, where it's all I wrote, and I really shouldn't have been that obsessed with it. That's one of those things that I definitely learned about myself, is that I can't just write one thing for several months and then, because by the end of it, I won't want to write anything at all. Because I think I wrote that for like 3 or 4 months, and then after that I took like a break for 3 months because I was like, that sucked. Like that experience sucked, because at the end of it I have the story that I can't really use for anything else, and I'm not really that keen on rewriting it. So yeah. Would you work on multiple things at once, or are you like a one?
Oh yeah, definitely. And like themed anthologies can fuck off. gonna reject me and then leave me with a story I can't use anywhere. Cheers. Like, what? You're gonna pay me what? $0.01 per word for it anyway? Oh no! Like, I'm out $50 in 3 months of my time. You know. So I totally agree. I don't write for those typically, but yeah, no, I definitely. Anyway, I do work on several things at once, and I think again, it's that thing we're talking about, like taking the pressure off each individual thing. And I always say that like good stories are what you discover; they're not what you know already. So then you don't feel like you're just dictating a bunch of interesting stuff to prove how clever you are. You're kind of, well, you know, if this one pans out today or next week, then that's great. Or if this one is the one that I become more interested in, that's good as well. So I'm working on so many things at once that I forget. Then suddenly you find a Google Doc with thousands of words in it, and you're like, oh, cool. All I need to do is finish this. That's a lovely feeling.
Just move this paragraph and boom, done.
Yeah, pretty much. And then you're just like, oh, like I forgot I, researched all of that and plotted the whole thing out. So yeah, I definitely advocate writing a whole bunch of things at once and submitting a whole bunch of things at once. And like, I wrote this entire paragraph yesterday and then just deleted it because it was a summary of a submission I'm waiting to hear back from, which is like 512 days. I've got my fingers crossed that they'll get back to me any day now. They shortlisted it. Like, they shortlisted it this time last year, which I found out after asking them like a month after they said they would get back to me. And I was afraid to ask them even because sometimes I follow up with them and say, listen, you said you'd get back to me by January, it's February, you didn't. Like, have you thought about it? And they're like, don't clog up our inboxes with these emails. Like, we'll get back to you if we want it. How dare you even ask? It really depends on the publisher, right? In this case, they were like, cheers, like, thanks for asking and you've been shortlisted. And it's like, oh, cool, you didn't think to tell me? And then that was a year ago, so it's been shortlisted for a full year. I'm not allowed to submit it anywhere else. But imagine, fine, because imagine that was all I'd done. Imagine that was all I submitted. And imagine this was like how I made my money. That would drive me insane. So write loads, submit loads. Don't worry too much about it. And it's, if people like you and me can read, highly praised and prize-winning stories and not enjoy them, then editors can also read stories that we've written that are very good that maybe they don't think are, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're right. That kind of like knowing when that's happening takes a long time of submitting to figure out, you know.
Yeah, I'm very, very new to the submitting game, to be honest. Like I've been writing for like a while, but I haven't really like made submitting stuff like a real solid part of my process. I'm trying to get better at it, but I've got like 3 or 4 submissions at the moment, which is like the most I've ever had ever. And yeah, like I've been really shooting at the moment for like stuff that pays, but like that has like a quick turnaround, so I can get rejected quickly and then move on to the next thing. But yeah, seeing things that are like, you know, it's like average response time of 400 days, but they don't accept simultaneous submissions. I'm just kind of like, what? Like, come on.
Would you even let me send you anything at this point, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And particularly when you're like, guys, can you at least admit that that's weird? They're like, no.
Yeah. No, this is just how it's done. You're like,
if you want to get into our magazine, you just have to wait that long. And you're like, no, that's insane. Like,
yeah, no, like that long without, like as you say, like without any feedback, like where it is in the process or the pile, or if it's been shortlisted, you know.
No, they did. 3 weeks ago, they told me they would let me know within 2 weeks. So it's just it's not like they didn't get back to me.
Yeah, sorry,
they did after about 480 days. They did get back to me, saying that I would know by now, and I don't. So.
That's slightly less farcical.
Tell a lie.
God.
Yeah. Dear, I feel like we've covered a lot of I don't know, interesting stuff about all different aspects of the process.
Yeah, I think we have.
It's been lovely talking to you.
It's been great talking to you, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So that was Jonathan Cosgrove. I hope you enjoyed the chat. Do check out Crystal Lake Publishing's Arterial Bloom anthology. And if you have anything you want to let me know about the show, just send me an email at losingtheplotpodcast-at-gmail-dot-com, and I look forward to hearing from you. But that's all from me for this episode, so until next time, thanks for listening. Bye bye.